Welcome to Kiffin's Keep, an intellectual resource for the pillar and buttress of the truth, which is the church. This is a project of the London Lyceum, which is all about serious thinking for a serious church. I'm Jordan Stefaniak, host of Kiffin's Keep and president of the London Lyceum. And as always, I'm excited to be here with you all today. In today's episode, I'm going to be covering the topic of the limits of doctrinal meaning, or the limits of concepts. Where is it exactly that you get to define a term? Basically, who gets to define what? Before we jump into the topic, though, make sure to like the video if you enjoyed the content, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss anything, and then drop a comment on what you think. If you agree or disagree, it's fun to do these sort of things and get good feedback on here. Not just that you agree, but that you have further follow-up ideas or comments or thoughts or questions or disagreements. That helps me think through these topics. So even if it's not helpful to you, maybe it's helpful to me. Okay, so let's go ahead and get into it. Before I do that, I guess let me let you know two things. One is the Jags are back, right? So we hired Liam Cohen, and we've heard his Duval all around the world, which was tragic. But I'm going to play that video every single time he wins a game, which hopefully is a lot this year and next year and the year after. The second thing is I have started another YouTube channel related to housing economics. So if that's something that really fits what you're interested in, this is very sort of outside the scope of this, except for sort of like theological economics sometimes. But if that's of interest to you, you can jump on. I'll put a link in the description so you can click on it and subscribe. I'm trying to be consistent there too. But this is definitely the priority video that I like to make every other week, at least for you guys. So, okay, let's go ahead and talk doctrinal meanings or concepts. So a week or two ago, a review of mine that I had released on this book right here, Creator, Peter Leithart's book. Very, very nice cover, by the way. I think I've probably mentioned that before. Either way, I wrote a critical review of his book. It was 6,000 or 7,000 word essay, trying to both critically interact with it, but also provide some conceptual tools for how do we read the Bible well, particularly when it comes to the doctrine of God. Because this seems like, in my experience, 90% of the disagreement on the doctrine of God is not actually substantially metaphysical or other sorts of debates. It's actually just how do we read the Bible? So when the Bible says that God changed his mind or he got angry, what does that actually mean? 90% of the debate, in my experience, goes right there. What do we mean by that? And I think the way that Leithart reads the Bible there in those ways is commendable, yet it's faulty. And so I wrote this critical review, and it's on our website, thelondonlyceum.com. It's open access, so it's part of our journal, the most recent journal essay or journal issue. And it came out, and a friend of mine, Ryan Mullins, read it. He didn't like it, and he shared that. And we ended up going back and forth a good bit on the internet. And it was interesting, sort of the disagreement that we had. And it seems that we both agree and yet disagree on the same central piece here. So the main area in my mind of disagreement is he says divine simplicity equals this. And so that any sort of example that I would bring that would be outside the box of this is what divine simplicity means. It means no distinctions whatsoever. So if I bring up somebody like Scotus, or if I bring up somebody like Gregory, or a number of other theologians that would be outside this neat little box, he'd say, no, that's not divine simplicity. They're paying lip service to it. So what they say what they're doing is divine simplicity, but it's not actually divine simplicity. And I want to say, no, it is divine simplicity. He's going to say, look, no, there's a clearly defined set of what divine simplicity means. And so if you reject this or you do something else, you can call it divine simplicity all you want. That's not what it is. I think that's a reasonable view, but I think it's wrong when it comes to at least divine simplicity. And that really brings us to the question of who gets to define what a doctrine is or means. Who defines the limits, the sort of vagueness of the test cases? I mean, it's the example of like, who gets to define when somebody's bald? Is it like me when I've basically lost most of my hair? Or is it when you're completely bald? What's exactly sort of the line where you cross over it and you're no longer categorized as this, but you're now categorized as something else? And that's part of the overall project of a book that I have coming out on classical theism called Classical Theism, a Christian Introduction. It'll be Lexham Press. I think it'll be here next year. It's taken a while, but it'll be here eventually. So mark your calendars or whatever. Pick up a copy. So let me, I guess, walk through a couple of examples to hopefully sort of cash out how I think about this, and you guys can tell me if you think I'm wrong. So let's start with something like the doctrine of creation. What does that mean? Does the doctrine of creation necessarily mean out of nothing, or does it mean a creation out of pre-existing material? Who gets to define what that is? I think prior to the creation narrative that we get with Moses, most everybody is thinking of the doctrine of creation in ways of pre-existing material, sort of this cosmic battle, whatever, and then Christianity comes on the scene. Moses comes on the scene, and it says, no, 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 no. God is creating out of absolutely nothing, radically shifting what the doctrine fundamentally means. It doesn't matter what the Babylonians thought about what creation is. That's just not how Christians understand creation. That's not how Moses or anybody else is understanding creation. Creation is fundamentally given a different inflection at that point. Or maybe the doctrine of providence. You have other sort of non-Christian examples like the Stoics, who have this vision of fate, and then you have sort of, I guess, what I would call a more reformed account, maybe, of providence, where God is actively sovereign over all things. And there can be some conceptual overlapping between the two things, but you read somebody like John Calvin's Institutes, and he's going to rail constantly, saying, no, we don't believe in Stoic fate. That's wrong. That's problematic for reason X, Y, Z. So who then gets to define what providence actually means? Are we then denying providence, or denying these sorts of characteristics of what it means to have these things? So then you get to something like divine simplicity. It seems like somebody like Mullins is going to say, no, divine simplicity has this clearly defined meaning of no distinctions whatsoever. You have these 9th, 10th, 11th century Arabic debates, and it's very clear this is what it is. Thomas Aquinas says this, and end of story. But why are we allowing 9th, 10th, 11th century figures to define what the doctrine is, and then cutting out anybody who disagrees? It's almost like a no true Scotsman's fallacy. So when we get to somebody like Scotus or somebody else, and they don't fit the neat little box, and they're saying, I'm doing divine simplicity, then no, that's not real true divine simplicity. If you want to have divine simplicity, you have to have this. I think that's just problematic, because I think divine simplicity is fundamentally about composition. And I think you see this all throughout the Christian tradition. It's about denying composition of God, and it's not necessarily about denying distinctions of God. I mean, you have to have some sort of distinctions between the Trinitarian persons to have a Trinity. So they are going to admit of some sort of distinction and some sort of relation. And that's every Christian's doing that. And if you want to look at the external groups of what they're talking about with divine simplicity, you can look at Plato, you can look at Philo, you can look at some of these other older figures. And the way they are using simplicity is not anywhere near this sort of hyper... What just happened? Oops. It's not anywhere near this hyper no distinctions whatsoever. It's got to be completely identical in every single respect. That's just not how it's functioning in Plato and Philo and these other figures. And really, we should be allowed, when we're talking about a Christian doctrine, we should allow the Christians to sort of set the table as far as what the doctrine is meaning for them. Now, that doesn't mean that there isn't a Muslim version of divine simplicity where they say it means this or whatever else, but the way the Christians are using it and modifying it and codifying it has a particular sense, and that's fine to use that. So when it comes to this, I think divine simplicity, you should be allowing, here's the framework, I guess, that I sort of use. I'd say let's start with some baseline things like the ecumenical creeds or the ecumenical councils, and then we work our way down to larger sort of Protestant confessions, and then you can work your way down to, let's look at a group of exemplary theological masters and pastors. How are they functionally using certain doctrines? Where are the fringes on those, I guess, ways of thinking about it? So divine simplicity, not explicitly utilized in any of the ecumenical councils or creeds in anywhere that I can find. Maybe it is. If it is, then somebody pointed out to me, that's great. But I haven't been able to find that. You find impassibility, immutability, you find eternity, all those sorts of things. Don't find simplicity, so we have to go outside of that. You find it in the Protestant confessions. How detailed is it? Not super detailed. Some of them are more detailed than others. I mean, you have something like the Orthodox Creed of, what year is this? 16 something. It ends with an 8. 1678, maybe. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong. either way, the Orthodox Creed there, and it's going to say that God is what, like, I think he calls a most pure, simple act. And so it's going to give some robustness and clarity to it. But even if you break outside the Protestant confessions, because not all of them have it, and some of them are just no body, parts, or passions. So parts is all that's going on there. So composition. Then you want to look at the theological masters. So let's put all these theological masters together and say, I think you're going to have to be a little bit arbitrary. It's a little bit vague and gray. Like what percentage of majority must you have to say this is a doctrine that you have to hold and this is what it means, and there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. I think there's sufficient disagreement, especially as doctrine develops over time. So it's not like it was just codified in the medieval era and then it didn't see any changes. No, you see it obviously comes into a much more robust frame of reference in the medieval period, but even throughout the Reformation period and on, you look at somebody like Gisbertus Futsius and what he's doing in his own treatise on divine simplicity, where he's trying to reconcile the Scotist accounts with the Thomist accounts, and saying there's some differences there, and yet you can still read them differently, and yet they're still under this umbrella of what divine simplicity requires us to say. So I think it's quite clear, at least when you look at the variegated nature of the Christian tradition on how they're thinking and articulating divine simplicity, there are differences. And it's not anachronistic to go back and look and say, look at these differences, look at these unique aspects, these different inflections, and try to distill a core meaning that everybody, for the most part, is agreeing on, and then look at these other meanings that say, look, these are somewhat interchangeable. There's some different models that are being used here throughout the Christian tradition in different ways. That's an appropriate historical method to look back and say, how is this working, and then to put it to use for constructive theology today. So anyway, that's my general take. That's my approach when I think about these things. You tell me what you think. Is this a bad framework? Is there a very clear, this is the only way to think about divine simplicity, and if you allow any sorts of distinctions, then you're out? Because to me, if you're going to outlaw every single distinction, then obviously you're outlawing just some basic Christian doctrine about the Trinity and incarnation. And you don't want to do that. And I don't think anyone's doing that. Thomas is not doing that. Thomas doesn't change his mind, in my opinion, on divine simplicity. You can look at anywhere across the corpus. He's just saying different things that all cohere together one another. I don't see any distinctions, pun intended, right? So anyway, that's my take on meaning. So, I mean, there is a sense in which you want to understand what different people meant with what they said, but you got to look at the whole broad scope of things. So if you have various very important theologians, very important constructive theologians making different claims, you have to be able to recognize that and have to have some sort of understanding of doctrinal meaning and concepts that can accommodate for these differences without just casting off every single deviation and saying they're not really part of the club. So I think you're almost... Yeah, we'll just leave it at that. So let me know what you guys think about that topic. I think this was a fairly interesting topic. I didn't have a lot to say about it, but I hopefully had enough to say to pique your interest, to make you think a little bit. Because that's the point of most of these episodes, is just to talk about interesting and important topics, and to hopefully engage your mind in a little bit a new fashion. And again, remember, if you're interested in housing economics, you can check that out channel. I have a Substack for it too that I started, and I try to do regular posts on that. So let me know if that's useful. If you find that valuable, that's cool. Go check it out. I won't talk about it anymore on here unless it's super relevant. So anyway, thanks for everybody for watching and tuning in to Kiffin's Keep, and I look forward to cooking with you all soon.